The carpet in the new FNAF trailer is driving me insane. Yes, the design of this carpet sent me on a rabbit hole that involved over 16 hours of research, but I got it. I found something. And it says something about the direction of the next game. If you don't believe me, just humor me for a second and have some fun, because all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy. All work and no play makes Johnny a... Almost 6 months ago, Steelwool Studios posted the teaser trailer for their upcoming game, Secret of the Mimic. A lot of people immediately noticed that the carpet on the floor in the trailer looked like a nod to the iconic carpet designs from the hit movie The Shining. I thought this was an interesting connection, so I did what any reasonable person would have done. I watched the movie and listened to the entire 16-hour audiobook. And I found a lot of connections in the book, enough to confidently say that Scott heavily used The Shining, the book, as inspiration for the Mimic's backstory, and that he forced the people at Steelwool to read it while they made Secret of the Mimic. And yeah, we are talking about how a novel published in 1977 is relevant to a game in 2025. In the words of Steelwool, to see the future, sometimes you need to understand the past. But this all begins a bit earlier than that carpet that I hate. This rabbit hole actually begins with Matpat. When the first FNAF movie trailer came out, Matpat reacted to it, as you might expect him to, and 8 seconds into the trailer, he paused and said this.
So originally I was gonna pause it. I just wanted to kind of draw comparisons to Shining. Like, this feels very Shining-esque in terms of the color tone of it. And again, like,
this is a very odd observation to make after watching just 5 seconds of a trailer. Throughout the rest of the reaction, he kept saying that the movie was giving him major Shining vibes.
She looks very similar in terms of her styling to me, like here. Like, it's almost one for one.
When the movie released, it turns out he was in the movie. After his secret was out, he posted a video explaining everything, saying that Blumhouse had given him the entire movie script before filming had even started, meaning he knew the whole plot of the movie when he sat down to record this reaction. With that in mind, the comparisons he made to The Shining become even stranger. I fully believe he was trying to give us a hint about the plot of the movie, because the FNAF movie's plot is eerily similar to the plot of The Shining, specifically the original book. I'm going to summarize the book really quickly, and just let me know if any of this sounds familiar. The book follows Jack Torrance, a down-on-his-luck guy who got fired from his last job for beating someone up. He needs to provide for his wife Wendy and his son Danny, so he accepts a mediocre job as the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel. The Overlook is a very big and very old hotel with an unusual amount of deaths and criminal activity connected to it. Jack's son Danny has the gift of second sight and an imaginary friend, and he has nightmares about the Overlook before he ever goes there. It turns out that the Overlook is haunted, and it wants Danny. It eventually gets in Jack's head and convinces him to give Danny to it. Wendy and Danny escape the hotel in the end, and the boiler explodes, causing the whole building to fall apart, and the evil force possessing it is defeated. In case you forgot, in the FNAF movie, Mike loses his job at the mall after beating a guy up, forcing him to take a job as a night security guard at Freddy's Pizza. He does it to keep custody of his younger sister Abby, who talks to imaginary friends and draws pictures of the spirits from the haunted pizzeria before ever going there. Eventually, the spirits haunting the pizzeria get in Mike's head and convince him to give Abby to them in exchange for something. At the end of the movie, the pizzeria falls apart and the evil force that wants Abby is defeated.
Like, it's almost one for one.
Matpat didn't mention The Shining because the FNAF movie had a similar color palette. He brought it up because he had read the FNAF movie script and noticed that the two stories have the exact same core plot.
The color tone?
I will say the most specific similarities are in the book, and Matpat was comparing FNAF to the movie The Shining, so it's possible it was just a coincidence, but it led me down this rabbit hole, so I thought it was worth mentioning. Here's a clip from an interview of someone who worked on the movie.
Emma and I also talked a lot about The Shining. I was like, I want the Freddy Fazbear's to be like the Overlook Hotel of pizzerias, you know?
So we've established that Scott is probably a fan of The Shining and probably used it as heavy inspiration for his movie. But that isn't where this ends. It's even more likely that Scott has used The Shining as inspiration for some of the recent FNAF books and games, specifically the things surrounding the Mimic. Now it's time to start analyzing some carpet. But first, if you're still watching, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help a lot. Like we said before, that carpet that I hate, it's always talking to me. That's in my head at all times. It tells me to do things that I don't want to. It's an intentional Shining reference by the Steelwool, meaning they're probably on the Shining wavelength with Scott. Now let's talk about Jackie's Box. Yeah, the song. I think we can all agree that this is the best part of the song.
Where is my ball? I'm running out on the road. There is a car, and this is going to hit me.
This scene actually happens in the short story The Mimic from the 6 Tales from the Pizzaplex book Nexi. For the rest of this video, I'm just going to be calling it The Mimic Backstory to keep things simple. In the Mimic backstory, Edwin builds the Mimic to serve as a playmate for David so he can spend more time working. This works until one day, while Edwin is working, David chases his ball out onto the road and gets hit by a white van. In The Shining, the book, Wendy had a sister who died after chasing her ball into the road and getting hit by a delivery van. Based on all the recent connections between the movie plot and the carpet. Do you think this is a coincidence? This discovery was why I titled this video FNAF's Most Obscure Rabbit Hole, because the death of Wendy's sister is brought up in one scene in the Shining novel, which has 640 pages, making the chances of someone besides Matpat
I just wanted to kind of draw comparisons to Shining.
finding this astronomically low. This means that the part of the Mimic's backstory that became a giant meme is actually a reference to one of the greatest horror novels ever written. If you're still not convinced, listen to this one. At PAX West, there was a playable demo for Secret of the Mimic. Jackie, the woman pictured here, was the main antagonist. In The Shining, we learn that Jack Torrance's father was an alcoholic and an abuser who would frequently beat Jack and his mother. This contributed heavily to Jack's struggle with controlling his temper and alcohol consumption later in life. Guess what Jack's father used to call him? Little Jackie.
Like, it's almost 1 for 1.
So Steele will reference The Shining not only with the carpet in the teaser, but also with the main antagonist's name. But there's more to it than that. Whether the Jackie suit was built around the Mimic or Jackie is running the Mimic 1 program, we know that the Mimic is controlling Jackie in some way. And like Jack Torrance, the Mimic's violent tendencies also came from being beaten by their father. In the Mimic backstory, after David gets hit by the car, Edwin falls into a deep depression. The Mimic continues to follow Edwin around, still acting like the late David. This is too much for Edwin, and he flies into a grief-stricken rage and beats the Mimic to a pulp. He even uses a metal pipe to do it. And in The Shining, Jack's dad uses his cane to beat Jack's mom. Edwin's beating is what teaches the Mimic violence and corrupts its programming. Jack's father said, "Take your medicine," when he attacked Jack's mother. Jack begins saying the same thing when he tries to kill his family later on in the book.
And this is the medicine. So tell me, pup, are you gonna take your medicine?
He literally starts mimicking his father when he becomes violent, just as the Mimic is mimicking Edwin's violence when it attacks people. Listen to this passage from the book that describes possessed Jack. Little by little, a force had accrued, as secret and silent as interest in a bank account. Force, presence, shape, they were all only words and none of them mattered. It wore many masks, but it was all one. Now, somewhere, it was coming for him. It was hiding behind Daddy's face. It was imitating Daddy's voice. It was wearing Daddy's clothes. If you can't tell, this is told from the perspective of Danny. Wearing other people's faces and stealing other people's voices is the gimmick of the Mimic in Tales from the Pizzaplex and Ruin. And in Secret of the Mimic, it wears Jackie as a disguise while trying to attack us. So there you go. Jackie's entire character is a reference to Jack Torrance, and David getting hit by a car is a very specific and intentional reference to Wendy's sister getting hit by a car. Why is this important? Knowing what Scott and Steelwool used as inspiration for the Mimic and the game about its secret should help us understand the story they're trying to tell. In The Shining, Jack's issues with drinking and controlling his temper come from the abuse of his father. When he starts mimicking his father and trying to hurt his family, he's continuing the cycle of trauma that his father started. The Mimic story also focuses on the cycle of trauma. Edwin lashes out and beats the Mimic because it's a painful reminder to him of the son he lost. He lets his grief turn into violence, and that violence permanently affects the Mimic, as it did to little Jackie Torrance. And that's where FNAF's The Shining rabbit hole took me. As of posting this, Secret of the Mimic isn't out yet, but I wanted to make the community aware of these connections so we can work together to see if they end up having an important role in solving the lore moving forward. If you want to see a more traditional FNAF theory about Secret of the Mimic, click here to watch my other video on it. And if the game's already out, check it out anyway so you can make fun of me if I'm horribly wrong. If you're still watching, thank you so much. I hope this video was worth your time because this is all I've got. I'm the Night Guard, and it's time for me to clock out. God willing, I'll see y'all at my next shift.